Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 23rd of November 2015, the podcast that at first never succeeds. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again is Charles Thomas. Charlie, welcome back to the show.
It's been a while.
Let's coordinate the news of the Bogus. And first, we'll probably spend the bulk of the podcast talking about this because we need to cover what's been going on in the wake of the terrorist attacks in Paris.
Yes, and all other places around the globe, sadly.
Yeah, there's been quite a bunch of them, but last week when we talked about it, it had just happened. We recorded the podcast the morning after, and it was really too early to speculate. Because, the first day or two after it comes out, there's a lot of confusion. You don't want to jump to a lot of conclusions.
Yep.
But it seems that not only have eyewitness reports supported the idea that it was ISIS behind the attacks, ISIS themselves have released a statement claiming responsibility.
Yeah. Hopefully, I really hope that this is like a way for people to say, okay, this is a threat and it needs to be taken care of, but hopefully a lot more wisely other than, the other boondoggles we slowly get into and then, we never get out of.
So they said, quote, 8 brothers, equipped with explosive belts and assault rifles, attacked precisely chosen targets in the center of the capital of France. And they mentioned the soccer match between Germany and France, quote, both of which are crusader nations. And once again, we see this is what it's about. They're not doing this because their religion tells them to be evil and kill everyone. They're doing it because we're over there waging war against them.
Yeah, but no one seems to get that. They just think freedom and freedom fries and everything else and such.
So they say, quote, let France and all nations following its path know that they will continue to be at the top of the target list for the Islamic State and that the sin of death will not leave their nostrils as long as they partake in the Crusader campaign, as long as they dare to curse our prophet, blessings and peace be upon him, and as long as they boast about their war against Islam in France and their strikes against Muslims in the lands of the Caliphate, with their jets, which were of no avail to them in the filthy streets and alleys of Paris. Indeed, this is just the beginning. It is also a warning for any who wish to take heed.
Yeah. Again, they tell you that it was based on jets and drone strikes. By the way, the people who think Obama is a Muslim, he's killed more Muslims than his predecessor. And so how is he a Muslim again? If you're going to criticize someone, at least get the facts straight. That's all I ask. Is that too much?
I guess it is. Because, of course, it's our personal beliefs that are what's important, not the facts. And that's going to be a running theme throughout this coverage that we do. And one thing that's always important to keep in mind is that the actions of a government should never be taken to be the actions of the citizens. And I've got an article here in the Telegraph which points out that although President Hollande, someone in the comments told me how to pronounce that, and I still think I got it wrong, but Francois Hollande carried out the attacks on the Middle East, even though the French people were overwhelmingly opposed to it.
Yeah. But again, that's what it is. The governments are always these few elite people. And people want to talk about privilege. There is no other class that is more privileged than a representative of a government. Bottom line.
So this was a BVA poll, their group kind of like Gallup, published in Le Parisien. Again, probably didn't pronounce that right, but 64% of French citizens were hostile to taking part in military intervention in Syria, and 58% didn't trust Hollande to conduct any sort of operation. They thought that the action would turn all of Syria against the West and increase the barbarity of everything that's going on in Syria with the civil war. There's already been 100,000 dead there, and they thought that would just make it worse. 37% believed that this would help turn Syria from a secular republic to an Islamist state, just like what happened in Iran in the 50s, just like what happened to Iraq in the last decade.
And don't forget Libya.
Oh, yeah.
Some people, the Democrats, don't want to talk about.
Yeah, the forgotten war.
It's not forgotten for the people who live there, though.
Yeah.
It's always on their mind.
Oh, they remember it even if we don't. And then we wonder why they attack us. We didn't do anything to them. 35% thought it would just inflame the region. 22% didn't think it would do anything to better the lives of ordinary Syrians.
It never does.
No, of course it doesn't.
It never does.
No. War never does and never will. 17% expressed concern that there was basically no evidence that Assad had used any chemical weapons. We've covered that before. And 18% thought there would be retaliation against French interests. And boy, were they right about that.
Yeah. Just, again, people, people say, your voice matters. But when we're at the end of the day, it just seems, and I believe that there should be some type of structure in government. But sometimes, though, people who are against the wars and guys like, say, Gary Johnson or Ron Paul and such, heck, even Rand a bit, who tries to run on it. And guess where they're polled? They don't get a chance to even speak on these things. They're called terrorist sympathizers. You hate freedom. You hate America and all these other things. But yet the actions that the people who are in charge seem that they're the mostly want to destroy liberty, the ones who want to destroy everything what, not just the United States, but also what first world countries should be upheld to.
Well, I mean, it's like people understand that if it's a dictatorship, that the dictator doesn't have the support of the people, but they think that a democracy automatically means that it does, and it just doesn't. It just doesn't. If it did, marijuana would be legal in America and most other Western countries.
Yeah.
So that's how the French people feel. What about Muslims? Well, I couldn't really find any good polls from the region, but I did find a 2006 poll of British Muslims where 78% thought that the Danish cartoonist should be prosecuted for drawing a picture of Muhammad, but only 9% believed it was acceptable to use violence.
We have the West not only coming in and destroying your lands, putting in dictators, doing everything else, and then having, these cartoonists and such bastardize, one of your holiest prophets. It just seems like just the last straw, and I could get that, but I don't think putting them in jail is going to be the real answer to that situation. The best way is to have, the West not go to war with these countries that don't really do anything to them. Basically trying to validate their reasons to having one of the largest militaries where there's no real dragons or demons to slay.
But this is why it's so important for libertarians to keep doing what we're doing. Because 78% thought they should be prosecuted, but 9% didn't believe in violence. They don't realize government is violence. When you have government going against people who aren't themselves committing acts of violence or threatening to commit violence, if they're just doing something like drawing cartoons or whatever, how are they going to do it? What do you think's going to happen? And what do you think's going to happen when they barricade themselves in their Charlie Hebdo building and they keep posting all these cartoons of Muhammad? What's going to happen? What's that going to mean? Remember the Branch Davidian compound in Waco? It'll be that same kind of thing.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of things that offend me, and believe me, as a young black male living in the United States, I can easily just search on Google and see something that could offend me and such. But it doesn't mean I don't want to use the law and basically put them in jail, because it's a trickle-down effect. Because eventually, those people get enough power to put your views, or my views, they think that should be a crime and such, and put you in jail. Heck, we already had that in this country when you had interracial marriages. Once upon a time, this country was against the law. And people went to jail because of that. And people say, well, this can't happen. It has happened in this country. And, I'm talking crazy.
Yeah, but that's the thing. People have to understand that if you don't think something should be done through force, then you don't think the government should be doing it, because government is force. And people need to remember that.
Again, it's just an issue that I think most of the British Muslims and probably American Muslims would agree that maybe if you stop bombing and killing people in the Middle East, they wouldn't have this issue. I guarantee you that. I mean, are supporting these regimes that, kill off gay people or, throwing, having women getting doused with acid and stuff. Maybe if the United States stopped supporting them financially, maybe this stuff would probably go away. But, again, I'm talking crazy.
Now, of course, as per usual, bodies hadn't finished hitting the ground when statists were already using this as an excuse to push their anti-freedom agendas, as they always do. And topping our list is the people blaming the attacks on Edward Snowden and strong encryption.
Oh, joy, because strong encryptions never existed before Snowden.
Right. No one had PGP back in the 90s or anything.
No. I mean, most criminals and such, which I think that's what terrorism is. It's not a worldwide military issue. It's criminality.
Right. You're not fighting a war. You're trying to get criminals, but they're trying to fight it like a war. So.
And look where we end up. I mean, we didn't fight the mafia like a military way. Why don't we do the same thing what we did with them? Why can't we do something like that instead of just saying, oh, let's use the military and kill all the people?
So a couple of months ago, we covered Robert Litt talking about how there was a lot of opposition to restrictions on cryptography and said, quote, "It could turn in the event of a terrorist attack or criminal event where strong encryption can be shown to have hindered law enforcement." So they've been chomping at the bit for something like this. And it didn't take long for Fox News commentator and former George W. Bush press secretary Dana Perino to tweet, quote, "F Snowden, F him to you-know-where and back." And her colleague on Fox News, Greg Gutfeld, tweeted, quote, "If the attack was aided through whistleblowers leaking what the NSA cannot penetrate, will that be part of the movie?"
What? Seriously? You know, these attacks were going to happen regardless. In fact, shouldn't this be proof that the government can protect you? Remember Elliot Rodger? Before he did that horrible attack, he shouted this out on YouTube. On YouTube, the most public of forums, and the police did nothing. And you people, and they say, well, we need more of your data to protect you.
So according to the New York Times, quote, "The attackers are believed to have communicated using encryption technology," which is nice and vague. There's all sorts of cryptography going on. Most web pages use cryptography now. So, but then it says, "According to European officials who had been briefed on the investigation but were not authorized to speak publicly." And I think a while back we actually covered why that's bad journalism to just cover anonymous government sources when they're talking about this thing without anything to back it up.
Exactly, because government sources say it was because of the sunshine and such. It was partly cloudy. That's why we couldn't get the data and such, and people will run with it.
Well, it's a way to spread misinformation without having to be accountable for it, because they say, oh, well, why did you tell them they were using encryption? Oh, I didn't say that. I don't know who said that, but it wasn't me.
And this is probably the people who shout the most about personal responsibility, but when their name is called, they just want to go the other way.
So anyway, quote, "It was not clear whether the encryption was part of widely used communication tools like WhatsApp, which the authorities have a hard time monitoring, or something more elaborate. Or something even weaker that's also consistent with this basic non-statement that they gave."
I mean, I don't want to be all this negative stuff, but it just seems like you could show who are the real cowards. Where is the true bravery? They are the first ones. The people who say, I'm brave, we gotta take this down, are the first ones to say we should cut off our freedoms, for the illusion of security,
Well, the New York Times is so confident about this statement that they took it off their website, and for a while there, when you tried to get there, you would see a page not found error, and then after that, they put up a redirection so that the link would take you to a different story, which is a more general story about the Paris attacks. So no retraction, no nothing, just sweep it under the rug so no one will ever see it except on the Internet Archive where it still is.
Yeah.
Well, Bruce Schneier thinks he's figured out what type of encryption they used. They used double ROT13 encryption. Now, this is a joke, but I'm going to have to explain it to those of you who, basically people who know cryptography are laughing their heads off, but as Bruce Schneier has said, there's two kinds of crypto. There's the kind that stops your kid brother from reading your message and the kind that stops major governments. This is the kind that stops your kid brother. And what you do is you take every letter in the alphabet and you rotate it 13 spaces. Kind of like you had this dial with 26 positions on it, A through Z, and then it goes back to A. So like if you're on A, you click it around 13 spaces and you get to N. So A encodes to N. To decode it, you just rotate it 13 spaces again, and you're back to A. And we used to use this all the time back in the 90s on Usenet whenever we were talking about a new TV show or something and we wanted to protect people from spoilers. We'd ROT13 our comments and then, You could just ROT13 it back and see it, and all the newsreaders had ROT13 built in. But basically, if you ROT13 it a second time, you undo it. In other words, they didn't use cryptography. They communicated in the clear.
I don't know which is more sadder, these governments who did not see this coming, or they could see this coming, but, they overthought it.
So, for example, they found a cell phone in a trash can outside the Bataclan concert hall where that massacre took place, and they were able to access the data on the phone. It wasn't encrypted, and that included a map of the concert hall and an SMS message sent completely in the clear saying, "We're off, we're starting," and they were also able to trace the phone's movements all the way around. And a lot of this is around a guy named, again, I'm going to mangle the pronunciation, Abdelhamid Aboud, and it's believed that he led both the Paris attack and the earlier attack in Belgium that was foiled. And it's thought that he operated the Belgian attack by cell phone from Greece in the clear, and his communications were intercepted. And there was another suspect that had wiretaps and listening devices placed. I mean, that's something else. No matter how good the encryption is on your phone, you're still speaking into it. So if they've snuck a mic into the room you're in, that's not going to do you much good. These were known terrorists, and they hid in plain sight. Officials knew about every single one of them, but they were so obsessed with encryption and who's hiding and all of this stuff we have to do because everything's going dark, that they missed the things that known terrorists were doing in the clear. They're so obsessed with crypto and increasing their budget and powers that they've completely forgotten how to do their jobs.
So basically what the average day of the government is, they just ask for more money but become more incompetent.
Yeah, pretty much. But here's the lesson about strong crypto. It's too late. You can't put this genie back in the bottle. Math is math. Once it's published, it can't be unlearned. And, trying to make math illegal, which is basically what they're doing, the idea is insane enough, but all you're going to accomplish is that people like you and me won't have strong crypto, but the bad guys will just use it illegally. Outlaw strong crypto, and only outlaws will have strong crypto.
Exactly. You're going to get the low-hanging fruit, while the big-hanging fruit is going to be doing the stuff that is illegal.
Yeah, but encryption exists. There are no takebacks here. What they're trying to deny us is convenient strong encryption. But terrorists and other criminals have shown they'll happily work to get around inconveniences. Mandating weak crypto won't make a difference where it matters, but it will make the rest of us more vulnerable.
Every time I hear these stories, I'm like, why can't I just get a job with the government, man? I could do absolutely nothing and just fail upwards. Seriously, you fail, you go right up to the top.
So the next group of evil fucks are the anti-Uber crowd.
Oh, the Ubers. Everything else is the Uber. Uber is the evilest thing in the universe, Shane. Don't you realize that?
And everyone went on the attack against Uber for all sorts of things that they didn't do. So they've come under fire for their surge pricing, despite the fact that pretty much every economist has tried to educate the people saying, no, it's actually a good idea. But they have a policy that if it's a disaster area, they turn off the surge pricing. And in this case, they had cut that off within 30 minutes of the first attack. And they kept their Uber drivers running, and many of them even took people home for free. But of course, that didn't stop people spreading rumors on the social media. For example, on Twitter, we have @IamChapa, quote, "They added 400% surcharges in Paris last night to evacuating people." Not true. There's @SirPercy73, who tweeted a picture of a guy flipping the bird out the window with "Everybody hates Uber," and he said, "Uber are scum, surge pricing in Paris, you really are the scum of the earth."
That's amazing.
Yeah. The terrorists aren't the scum. The politicians that got them into this mess isn't scum. Uber is the scum. @TeamThirstTrap, "I see Uber, knowing they couldn't take advantage of surge pricing, suspended service in Paris last night." So that's kind of a 2 for 2 completely incorrect things. 1, they shut off the surge pricing rather quickly, and 2, they did not suspend service. And the same thing from @LuxuryBrook, quote, Hashtag Uber greed. Hashtag Uber. I don't know why he needs the Uber hashtag in there twice, but hashtag Paris. Surge 4.5 times. When people start complaining, they suspend services. Again, none of that is true.
At least at Jeff Charlotte took ownership and such.
Well, no, he really didn't, because, well, what he had tweeted was, quote, in Paris last night, taxis took passengers for free. Uber jacked prices 400%. My hate is pure. And what he did was he just deleted the tweet and tried to cover it up. When people called him on it because they had the screenshots, what he said was, quote, I deleted tweets on alleged, now he's saying alleged, Uber surge because I was rioting as an angry private person stranded in Paris last night, not as a reporter.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I understand, but I'm at least trying to give the dude at least a little bit of leeway saying.
Yeah, but he never came out and said, I'm sorry, that wasn't true. That was never true. I shouldn't have said it. Just saying I wasn't acting as a reporter. I mean, come on.
I know, but I'm trying to give at least somewhat say that, okay, at least somewhat responsibility. I know he didn't. There's no shred of it anywhere here. But at least he said it's alleged, so it's something.
Yeah, only because he was called on it by about 50 million people.
That's true.
So Uber official Gareth Mead said, quote, it's a real shame that some individuals are using such sad circumstances for their own purposes. The rumors are not true. To be absolutely clear, Uber immediately removed dynamic pricing across France last night. The level of demand during such a terrible time meant that our partners were incredibly busy and constantly on trips. This remains the case today. And I would remind you that Paris, we covered this, I think, a few months ago when it happened. They had all of the basically almost riots from taxi drivers going against Uber, and the actions of the French government weren't to act against the taxi drivers, but against Uber, and now they're facing criminal charges for operating an illegal car service business.
And here's the funny thing. Uber, the downloads for the app rose. So I think they're going to have a bit of a chunk of change to fight these criminal proceedings, man.
So, Charlie, you had something you wanted to talk about regarding the students from the University of Missouri?
These lovely snowflakes. I probably, if Martin Luther King was around right now, he would probably be crying, but also a bit laughing at this as well, saying these people who are now wanting these safe spaces, black only. I'm like, wait a minute. These young people or people around my age know anything about history? Because they already have black safe spaces.
Yeah, it was called segregation.
Yeah, Jim Crow. State-sanctioned racism, which there's still some today. Hello, drug war. But that was their safe space. Black safe spaces were right there. And if you left that safe space, you were probably going to get lynched. Mostly by police officers, the people supposed to protect us. These youth students, and here's the funny thing saying there, Professor, the dude who was the main guy actually comes from a wealthy family. $20 million.
I saw 30 million in the reports I saw.
But
apparently the whole big thing that started it off was one guy in a pickup truck yelling out the N-word, and it wasn't even on campus.
Seriously. I mean, I walk around and I hear stuff like that. I just turn it on. I'm like, moving on. And mostly I just put on my headphones and just chill and listen to some music and what have you. It's hateful, yeah. I mean, heck, I see a lot of hateful comments online and message boards, or YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. But yeah, I'm not going to go and cry or be mad about that. I mean, I'll be pissed off at it. I would try to correct some people, and I have, but I don't try to judge people by their community. I try to judge people by their individuals, by their own merit and such.
Yeah, and the reason why we're covering this in our Paris coverage is because after the terrorist attacks happened, of course, there was so much news media coverage over it. These people started complaining about the coverage the Paris attacks were getting and not them, and so they started tweeting with the hashtag #FuckParis.
And I honestly said, I was looking at this, I'm like, how dare you? Because there are so many people, regardless of many colors and everything else, who died. In fact, the person who was outside that soccer game, who actually, protected the people from not getting those bombs out, the dude was actually a Muslim. He went out and actually saved so many people's lives and what have you. And to say that, to have that hashtag, that lovable hashtag, fuck Paris, They just want attention. Like, feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for me for all these horrible stuff that happened. But yet the world doesn't stop around you. The world isn't about you.
Well, and it's also not just the insinuation. Some of them said it outright, that what they went through in Missouri was exactly as bad as what they went through in Paris.
Huh? Did anyone lose their life? Did anyone get shot up and killed?
Did anything happen other than they got their fifis hurt?
No. And this to me frustrates me because it just shows that this closed-mindedness of this generation, this closed-mindedness that it seems to be spreading not only with black students, but also white students. We had that white student basically kicking out the reporter. You saw that video say, get out. You're not supposed to, like, we get some muscle here. I'm like, what is going on here? What is really going on here? It's insane.
And I should point out, it was a white woman that was doing that.
Yeah, there was. And it's funny. I watched actually Thunderfoot's video on it, and it's just, to me, he's just basically worded it a lot better than what I'm doing right now. But seriously, these people who have this great potential to do something great, the way they're acting right now, saying this whole hashtag fuck Paris and doing all these things, it screams immaturity. It screams just attention seeking, and it screams this lack of compassion, a lack of empathy. And that's worrying to me. And it should be worrying to you because these are the next generation. And if you have that lack of empathy, bad things usually happen.
Now, one group of people we didn't hear much from is the usual evil opportunist gun control nutbars of how we need gun control to stop things like this. There were a couple scattered here and there, mostly from assholes like Piers Morgan, but I think most of them knew what a failure of an argument this would be, given that France has among the most restrictive gun laws in the world, and Paris restricts guns even further. And I mean, we've talked before about the statistics compiled by Davy Barker showing how many people are killed in a shooting when there's no armed citizen than when they're stopped by an armed citizen. I mean, it's night and day.
Yeah, it's insane.
And then we're talking about things like in the theater, that they were just going around from one person to the next, shooting. And some people say, well, if someone would have had a gun, there might have been a shootout. Well, that probably would have been a better result than what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we heard very little of that. And in fact, it was refreshing to hear a voice of reason on CNN from Tom Fuentes. Take a listen to his comments.
Joining me now for more is CNN law enforcement analyst Tom Fuentes.
Well, they've had al-Qaeda cells in Europe, and particularly in France, for decades, as a matter of fact, including an attempt to blow up the United States Embassy in Paris. And in fact, one of the individuals coordinating that attack on the embassy helped in the Charlie Hebdo attacks. He was back out of jail, back out there, and I think that also many of the European countries have been in denial that their strict gun control laws are going to keep guns out of the hands of bad guys, and it just doesn't. Gangsters and terrorists have no problem getting automatic weapons, grenades, and all kinds of other equipment to use in these attacks. And I think now we're seeing that more and more, where a lot of people didn't believe that before.
All right. And Tom, just really quickly, how do you protect yourself against this? I mean, we're saying it's sophisticated, but in the end, it's a guy with an AK-47 pulling a trigger, possibly a lone wolf with some inspiration from abroad. Law enforcement officials trying to protect a city against this. I mean, the challenge is huge.
Right, it's almost an exercise in futility to try to protect everybody, especially at soft targets like movie theaters or opera houses or athletic stadiums. Had this been a sophisticated, well-trained attack, you'd have numbers of dead nearing 1,000, not, as terrible as 120 or 30 people is. If that had been a trained group of individuals, really well-trained, the death toll would have been 1,000. And I think we're at least fortunate that these attacks could be much more horrific if these people really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and they just said it right there. It's futility.
The fact is that when you have armed citizenry, you don't have to worry about any of that because the people you're trying to protect are able to protect themselves. And it may even act as a deterrent because, again, what happens with all these shootings? Where do they go? They go to the gun-free zones.
Yeah, they always have gone to the gun-free zones. They go to places where there's no chance of them getting hurt. They go to places where there's no chance for them to have any type of comeuppance. That's where that's what it is.
Yeah, so the solution, and I think this is the connective thread we've seen through all of this, the solution is not to try to bomb them out of existence or rely on our government to protect us. The solution is to allow people to protect themselves by arming themselves, by using strong crypto or whatever.
Yes, they can't protect you. The best solution is to train and protect yourself. Try to be more protective of your rights and your life as well.
Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. So, let government do it, they say. That'll be more efficient. Funny how it never seems to be. Case in point, our immigration system, which requires 95 forms to be filled out if you want to come here legally. That, folks, is why there's illegal immigration. It's easier to swim the Rio Grande than to climb Mount Bureaucracy.
Now I need to put down a t-shirt.
And, of course, they have to shuffle these forms all over the country, physically moving them around. So our government's been trying to make it easier. 10 years ago, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services started a project to digitize all of these forms so prospective immigrants could fill them out easily online. What were the costs? The project was projected to take 8 years and cost $500 million.
Okay, I can see some of that because, hey, this is important forms. You want to make sure every person in the United States has these. I see that. It's going to probably cost a little bit of money.
Well, if only it had been that efficient. 10 years in, they've spent over $1 billion, and the number of forms they've put online so far is 1.
Well, it's better than 0. Like I've said, I'm trying to be the devil's advocate.
Now, at one point, they had 3 digitized, but they had to be taken offline because the system had these massive problems and they had to scrap the whole thing and restart from scratch. So now the only form they have online is one that allows immigrants to renew or replace their green cards.
Wow. And here's the crazy thing about this. It's now projected to reach up to $3.1 billion and take another 4 years.
Yeah. So think about this next time you think we should hand something important over to the government.
Like I said, I think I should just find a way to have a job, just working there, just, again, make all this money and have no accountability.
If I could make $1 billion by putting one form online every 10 years, hey, I'd be set.
Yeah. Again, when I look at this stuff, why can't they hire the best and brightest to do this? Get these online companies and people for that. Okay, can you help us out? Bring the legal immigration into the 21st century. It's sad.
Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. So, we've done cops behaving badly stories, and we've talked about how great it would be if citizens could video cops like they're supposed to be allowed to do, and even better if the police wore body cams. But, like everything else government does, we should have known they'd screw it up. Turns out these body cams they've been getting are infected with malware, specifically an old but a highly malicious worm called Conficker. So this comes from security firm iPower. They found that when they got a hold of one of these cameras, their antivirus software immediately caught the virus and quarantined it. And they said, quote, if the computer did not have antivirus actively protecting the computer, it would automatically run and start propagating itself through the network and internet. iPower staff proceeded to test the virus in a virtual lab environment and did confirm that the virus was not a false positive. iPower uploaded the files to VirusTotal, a web-based application designed to test computer files for viruses, and the site verified iPower's findings.
Oh boy.
So yeah, all this is apparently one big boondoggle to a company called Martel, and according to iPower, quote, Martel staff has yet to provide iPower with an official acknowledgement of the security vulnerability. These cameras are being shipped to government agencies and police departments all over the country. President of iPower, Jared Pavao, had this to say, and this is a quote inside the quote, as the Internet of Things continues to grow into every device we use in our business and home lives each day, it becomes even more important that manufacturers have stringent security protocols. Ultimately, the public has to understand that pretty much any device we use today that connects to the internet or a computer has the potential to be compromised. This discovery has a huge impact as these devices are being shipped every day to our law enforcement agencies.
Wow. But hey, it's not really surprising. So, hey, how much more money would it be to actually fix this problem? I bet it's going to be a good round figure, like, say, $500 billion at this point.
Well, considering it's like embedded software and you can't just download and install a patch or anything, they'd all have to be recalled and wiped and reloaded.
In the meantime, we're going to have more police probably doing some more police behaving badly while the cameras are being wiped and cleaned. Then it's going to be up to the citizens to start videotaping it, and then next thing the police are going to be pissed off, and they're going to start smashing the video cameras or the phones all over again, and we're going to be right back in the same position.
Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. That's P-U-R-S-E. Moreover, most purchases can be made at a discount. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for sites to earn advertising fees by advertising and linking to Amazon.com. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals, including the deal of the day and limited-time lightning deals on all sorts of great products. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. And now it's time to decommission this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to Anne Frank Fonz, the trust that's set up to publish the famous Diary of Anne Frank. She's that famous teenage girl who hid in Amsterdam from the Nazis towards the end of World War II.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we all know about her.
Oh, yeah, by the way, here's a funny story. I don't know if it's true or not. I think that Anne Frank actually tried to immigrate to the United States, but she was denied.
Yep, they denied her visa to the U.S. And she ended up being captured by the Nazis and was executed early in 1945, just weeks before the British came to liberate the camp. So,
once again, all these people say, immigration, it's all evil and everything else. These people should say no to Anne Frank. And in fact, most of the Jewish community, when they were getting slaughtered in Germany, they said, nope, we can't really take you in.
Oh, they turned away entire shipfuls of Jewish refugees trying to escape the Nazis.
Yeah, again, the good old-fashioned American hospitality. History repeating, it always does. History always repeats.
But her diary survived and became a legend. Her father, Otto Frank, compiled her diary together with a bunch of other papers that were found that had been written by her, and that's the famous diary we all know. Now, Anne Frank died in 1945. The copyright term is for 70 years after the death of the author. Now, it's been more than 70 years already, but since we don't know the exact date that she died, that means that it continues to the end of the calendar year, so it actually goes into the public domain on the 1st of January 2016. However, the foundation, Anne Frank Funds, is trying to extend this copyright by all of a sudden having her father named a co-author, and since her father died in 1980, that would extend this copyright several decades.
So they're doing the Mickey Mouse thing, pretty much, right?
Well, it's worse than that. It's revisionism. They're taking this journal that's very famous that she wrote and saying that her father was a writer on it as well. And
yep,
it's fraud. It's complete fraud.
All for them to just hoard on this IP. It's amazing that people just want to hoard it. Like, I want the more money and everything else. It's not for his father. They just want to keep the money for themselves. I guarantee you it's going to come down to that. It's just sad that they would choose this whole history-making work and just hold it off for like a couple more dimes and nickels. It's sad.
And as the Torrent Freak article points out, most of the old media, like the New York Times, has been just passing this on like, oh, did you know there was a co-author, and not being at all critical about it.
Yeah. Where is the critical thinking? The internet is the most instant. Everything is instant, and you can find these things, you can verify these things, and yet they use this to spread their misinformation and their lies and Bogosity. Again, we're in this same situation. This situation that never seems to end.
But fortunately, we don't have to rely on them, not while we have sites like Boing Boing and writers like Cory Doctorow, who covered this and had no qualms at all about calling it a fraud.
And it is a fraud.
And he says, quote, "They argue that they and they alone are qualified to serve as stewards of Anne Frank's memories. This is manifestly untrue. The Dutch charity that runs Anne Frank House have done a pretty good job, and the two foundations have been locked in eternal struggle. If two organizations can represent Frank to the world, why assume that no more exist?" And that's also another issue here, is because Anne Frank House has been busy digitizing her journal, ready to have them online and available at the museum and everything the moment it goes into the public domain. And Anne Frank Funds is trying to pull the rug out from under them in doing that.
And I love this quote right here. It says, "To treat the words of Anne Frank, who inspired so many millions around the world, as an internal money spinner for one organization's purposes is to cheapen them. They're not an annuity. They are inspiration. They can't be both." That is so much win right there.
And I mean, it goes again. The whole reason Anne Frank wrote that journal in the first place was so that the rest of the world would know what was going on. She knew that there was a big probability that she wouldn't survive and that there wasn't going to be any money from her. It's not like she wrote a novel or anything like that.
No, this is something for the world to know. This story could connect to what's going on right now. And honestly, putting that in the public domain, having it free for everyone online, this could be something great. And I think, honestly, the Torrent Freak thing has this right here is saying, and I think we could agree here right here, it says, that's the harm of the copyright monopoly. Were it for not the copyright monopoly, we wouldn't have 7 Harry Potter books, but rather upwards of 7,000. Many other crap, but some outright stellar. There's a real cultural cost, a real cost to our common heritage right there. That's how the copyright monopoly punishes and withholds us all. And old media is completely oblivious to it. Yes, so much true. Same thing with fanfic, like it is. I know people don't like fan fiction and such. I understand that. I mean,
there's some really good fanfic out there.
I know. There's good stuff out there, and I honestly would agree there's a lot of crap around fan fiction. There's
well,
a lot
that's
of bad.
Everything.
That's true. It's just canon.
Sturgeon's Law, 90% of everything is crap.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, people just tell, oh, fanfiction, bad. But no, there's some really good stuff. I discovered some really good stuff as well. But again, to just to stymie people and say that only certain other people should just not write about the work and everything because it could be bad, it could be horrible and everything else. Let the public, let us define because we did a pretty good job. Basically, just saying, the poorly written and poorly bad fanfic, we just, laugh and mock it. But also the real good ones, like say, your Harry Potter book that you like. What was it again?
Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality.
Yes, that one.
Really, really good. It's complete now, and it is awesome.
Yeah, I need to check that out. But not only that, but I'll give a shout out to Blaine the First. I guarantee he's going to probably be happy if I mention this. Follow the Crustia. That fandom really loves that one, and that is a good story. Like everything else is going to be crap. Like people, oh my gosh, I don't want 7,000 crappy versions of Spider-Man. There's already are crappy versions of Spider-Man stories. Clone Saga, anybody? But there's probably some great stories that involve the character and make him even better. In fact, crossovers that define two genres that you can't, oh my gosh, this is impossible to convene. They combine to make something great.
Well, you even have derivative works. And this is one thing that Dr. O points out, because the Foundation is saying, well, if it goes into the public domain, who's going to maintain the integrity? Well, we haven't had to worry about maintaining the integrity of Shakespeare. And that's an example he used. But not having a copyright on Shakespeare means that Tom Stoppard can write Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, which is really good.
Yeah, I heard about that. You could use characters and put them in their own adventures. You could actually write these grand and beautiful stories.
Well, it's actually the same story. It's just from the point of view of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Yeah, different perspectives.
But if you can take an editor and make him a co-writer, Dr. O points out that can be a real problem. Quote, "The question of giving copyright protection to editors undermines the rights of authors. If my editors are co-proprietors of all my works, then they get the right to trump how I may use those words. My ability to resell my books after they go out of print would be contingent upon approval of my editor who works for a competing house. No creator should support this view. It represents eternal corporate bondage for all authors."
There's less rights for writers right now.
And if you're talking about the integrity of the work, Dr. O points out that this would actually undermine it because, quote, "The Foundation is arguing that the diaries don't represent Anne's views and thoughts, but rather that they have been intentionally distorted by her father to the point where they can no longer be said to be a faithful rendition of her diaries." And this is also a problem that Adam Sokol points out on the Jerusalem Post, saying that doing so would severely undermine the authenticity of her diary. And, in fact, a lot of Holocaust historians are already up in arms about it because if you're a Holocaust denier, you have to figure out how to deal with this diary because this diary just stands as a debunking of everything you're claiming, so you have to deal with it. And they deal with it by saying, oh, it's a fraud, she didn't really do it. They've been saying for years and years and years that it was really written by her father.
And now they have proof. They can say, well, there it is.
So, according to Alan H. Rosenfeld, who's a professor of English and Jewish Studies at Indiana University, quote, "Claims that Anne Frank never wrote it but her father did have been the stock in trade of anti-Semites who have sought to undermine the validity of the diary and declare it a hoax. The story of Otto Frank's alleged co-authorship that you reference below is not of this bogus kind and does not spring from such malicious motives. All the same, I find it regrettable, for it may once again revive doubts regarding the true authorship of the book and reinforce the arguments of Holocaust deniers and others like them who have long wanted to neutralize the historical value of Anne Frank's diary."
Like I said, you're undermining the reason why the book exists. This is why the copyright situation is so messed up right now that people would just like to hoard their riches, hoard all the money instead of actually doing some good. And now you're just going to take that out of the whole table. You're going to take that and feed more to this whole, the Nazis didn't really do all this type of stuff.
Yeah, so Anne Frank Fonz is no kind of steward of Anne Frank's legacy. They are merely this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
Hi, I'm Dave. You may recognize me from previous Bogosity episodes. However, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm also part of a podcast, the Superplex Brothers Podcast, Head on over to superplexbros.com. You can check out the podcast for video games and pro wrestling. We also have news, reviews, and editorials and all kinds of stuff just to talk about video games and pro wrestling and everything else that comes in between. So if you're into that, why don't you come check us out?
And now let's enter assure this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
And this week it goes to Klein Collins High School, who suspended a student for drugs after a drug test proved she wasn't on drugs.
Because of the reason. That's all I could come up with this.
So this is sophomore Haley Gibbons, who got a 30-day suspension because they believed her daughter was high on Xanax, because she has a tic where she kind of sways back and forth when she sits. I have that same thing. I've been doing that all my life. If I sit for any length of time, I start swaying back and forth.
Yeah, same here. Just like a little.
But they decided that that meant that she was high on Xanax, and so they suspended her, and they called her mother, and the mother was livid, and the mother was all like, "You're going to get a drug test, young lady." And so she got her daughter an 11-panel drug test and came back 100% negative for everything.
So the mother probably has some egg on her face right now, probably.
Well, okay, but I mean, she's behind her daughter. She's like, okay, let's take this to the school. Hey, you suspended my daughter. You accused her of being on drugs, and here's the drug test. And Associate Principal Stephen Matheson told her, quote, "I don't have to prove to you what drug she's on. I don't care if the LSD test came back negative. We don't consider drug test results."
What?
And when she asked him what she could do to prove her daughter wasn't on drugs, Matheson said, "Nothing."
Really? That's so you have no evidence. Are we going to basically accuse your daughter anyway? I thought we were past the Salem witch trials, man. I thought we were past that.
I think it's been obvious over the course of this podcast that we're not. We're really not.
Just say they're a witch. Just put the blank comment here and just have the people with their torches and pitchforks and just drive them, rationality and insane thoughts away. While they go like, okay, we have our crazy delusions. And this is from a Christian, by the way. But yeah, they have no evidence. We're just going to go with our feelings.
And what they said was that she just must have been on acid because that was the only drug that wasn't covered in the test.
So you're just basically trying to say, okay, she can't be on anything, but she might be on acid. At this point, do you even have to go take a blood test or anything else to test for acid? I would like, okay, then we'll take the drug test with the acid thing. Comes out clean. Then what? What are you going to say then? That's what I would do. I would be that spiteful. That's just me.
After they first accused her of being on drugs, they searched her belongings and found more evidence that she was on drugs, which was a legalized marijuana sticker.
Oh, no. Stop, please. Hi for the children. Oh, no.
And you combine that with the nose piercing, and, well, how can you deny it?
Oh, no, she's a delinquent. We must send her to prison and have her re-educated.
So her mother talked to a lawyer and said, hey, what can we do? And said, well, by the time all of this would go through court, she'll be out of college, and there's not even a chance of a monetary reward, so what can she do? Well, she's not sending her back to that school, and she's actually required to send her to an alternative school for the 30 days of the suspension. And during Gibbons' third day at the alternative school, she called her mother, crying, asked her not to make her keep going there because it was so horrible, but she doesn't have a choice. She's not going to send her back to Klein Collins, and she can't afford to put her in private school, so she's just going to homeschool her and enroll her in online courses, and that's her only other choice.
It probably is for the best because, public schools are complete garbage anyway.
But how many other data points do we need on how badly we need school choice?
Well, again, it doesn't matter. If you keep saying school choice, you're saying, well, you hate teachers. Destroy all teachers and have kids basically dumb as rocks, even though they're dumb as rocks right now. That's what the kids are being taught by these tenured teachers who basically are just teaching towards a test and not really teaching the kids anything.
The ones who taught all of the kids that are now at Ms. U.
The ride never ends, Shane. It never ends.
So after all that, how can Klein Collins High School not be this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this Dead Raccoon of Tomorrow edition of the Bogosity podcast. As always, you can come to forum.bogosity.tv to read the show notes and join the discussion. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or at patreon.bogosity.tv, and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. You can even stick it in an audio file if you want. Thank you for listening, and thanks again to Charles Thomas for joining me.
No problem.
Until next time, here's a quote from Lawrence Lessig. Americans have been selling this view around the world, that progress comes from perfect protection of intellectual property. Notwithstanding the fact that the most innovative and progressive space we've seen, the internet, has been the place where intellectual property has been least respected. You know, facts don't get in the way of this ideology. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Bogosity. Christmas time is coming, and the most classic of Christmas stories is A Christmas Carol. But how much do you know about the original Charles Dickens novella? Have you dismissed it as a children's book with one-dimensional characters amounting to nothing but platitudes and cliches? Maybe your appreciation of the book was even muted by those dry, boring, annotated books they made you read in school. My book, the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, uses both facts and humor to present the book in a way you probably haven't seen it before. Giving praise when deserved and beratement when warranted, this book is put in the perspective of its time and shows a dimensional, multi-layered Ebenezer Scrooge from start to finish. Skepticism, history, and even economics are employed to show the book in relation to today in an easily accessible format. Appreciate the Christmas of your youth all over again. Get the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, available at Amazon and on PDF as well. Just a quick note, there will be no podcast next week because of Thanksgiving. We'll see you a week after that. There should be 2 podcasts in December before the Christmas break. And after that, we'll see you for our annual end-of-the-year podcast, where we name 2015's Idiot of the Year. Thank you all, and enjoy the break.